one of the biggest questions about the current Battle of Bakhmut is who is fighting on each side, who is throwing their more valuable troops into the fighting, who is going to emerge victorious, and who is willing to sacrifice more to achieve their objectives. I'm Paul, U.S. Army combat veteran. It's March 7th, 2023. This is your daily Ukraine update. Let's get right into it. Okay, first, let's take a look at the control map. As you guys can see, the biggest changes to the control map are Russian advances along the eastern and northern part of the city. You can see here this area in the northeast up to the Bakhmut. Looks like Russian forces have advanced. And this is probably following a Ukrainian withdrawal. There's a lot of indications that the defending and resupplying forces beyond the Bakhmut is really difficult for Ukraine, obviously, because of the limited number of choke points. So it makes perfect sense that they've chosen to withdraw from those sectors. Probably tomorrow we'll see this sector be removed or be occupied by Russian forces as well. You can also see when we zoom out a little bit that Russian forces have continued to push westward in an effort to increase the pressure on these two roads out of Bakhmut. Now, critically, this is H32, the road going into Chasiv Yar from Ivansky. There's some reports, particularly by the Russian Ministry of Defense, that a few days ago, about a week ago, it was actually a Russian strike, destroyed the bridge over the only paved supply road into Bakhmut, and muddy conditions are hampering Ukrainian resupply efforts as they are increasingly resorting to unpaved tracks. This is important, of course, because we're talking about, of course, supplies need to go in, but more importantly, to conduct an effective fighting withdrawal, people and material needs to go out. Ukraine needs to have prepared defensive positions, but most importantly, needs to control their withdrawal efforts. And the reason they may be trying to hold Bakhmut for as long, what seems like recklessly long, is because the withdrawal is being hampered so badly. Again, I've talked about this. I really believe that Ukraine waited probably too long to hold Bakhmut. The U.S. warning them weeks ago so seriously that they communicated the message by the U.S. president himself, if some of the rumors are to be believed. And that is a stark message that sometimes I think Ukraine and many countries fail to appreciate just how expansive the U.S. intelligence apparatus is. So when it comes to a conclusion, especially one as strongly held as the recklessness of defending Bakhmut, it's not the product of a silly dream or knocking back some beers with your friends. It's the product of sometimes years of intelligence preparations. You remember the U.S. has signals intelligence listening to Russian phone calls and radio transmissions. We have spies inside the Russian security apparatus from the Kremlin to the military. We have satellites that are continuously watching and updating. The U.S. intelligence apparatus almost certainly has powerful AI systems that can do much of the analysis and thinking and forecasting that work in parallel or in conjunction with human analysts who are oftentimes experts at their field. The few that I've known have been literal geniuses, truly like savants in terms of their area of expertise. And so when the U.S. says, hey, you really shouldn't hold Bakhmut, you should really take that very seriously. And I worry that Ukraine hasn't and is now having to pay the price. When we look at the combat map, you guys can see that Russia is pushing hard, concentrating its largest offensive efforts in, of course, Donetsk, but really in Bakhmut. You can see the amount of pressure they're trying to put on H32, the supply road, right? Forces in the east trying to advance through the south. Again, this has to be a controlled withdrawal. You cannot allow the Russians to achieve a breakthrough. and you have to buy enough time to complete your withdrawal effectively, which has become increasingly challenging. You can see Russia continuing a increasingly exhausted-looking effort to push through Crimean alignment, and occasionally even keep Ukrainian forces on their toes in Davorichna. So we see Russia beginning to start to try to use some level of economy of force. Again, still a lot of dispersion among these attacks. But again, it's hard to overstate how critical it is that Ukraine completes this withdrawal from Bakhmut without expending more resources. And that leads us to really the next point I wanted to talk about, which is one of the most important questions. Who is fighting on each side? Now, you may think, Paul, that's sort of a silly question. It's Russia and Ukraine. That's not the issue here. What the issue is that, as we've talked about, for Ukraine, the strategic appeal of Bakhmut is that Russian forces are there. It is a place where for sure Russian forces are committed to fighting. Now, those Russian forces, some reports indicate, for example, the Kiev Independent reported that there's 2 Russian elite air assault brigades in this fight, and that Wagner has begun to commit its professional soldiery, not just the untrained conscripts, but that the untrained conscripts are being used as recon by fire elements to allow the more professional Wagner troops to target and launch attacks on Ukrainian troops. This is, of course, a sign that Russia's best are fighting here, and that Russia does not have an infinite reserve of elite troops. Now, the question is, are Ukraine's elite troops still here? I think the preponderance of the evidence, the preponderance of the intelligence indicates that no, that these troops are actually fairly green, recently mobilized, and they are assigned there is no easy urban warfare. Don't get it twisted. But defensive operations are probably the ones that newly trained troops are best equipped for, because they involve occupying a position, engaging the enemy as they approach, and then, when necessary, withdrawing. And this is probably, if true, would mean that Ukraine has pulled out its most seasoned and experienced troops and backfilled them with TDF forces, which would explain, of course, why Russia is making incremental gains with minimal counterattacks. It would also mean that while Russian airborne forces and elite Wagner troops are pinned in Bakhmut, somewhere elsewhere on the front are elite Ukrainian troops. Hopefully, they are preparing for a major offensive operation, right? Working with those tank commanders who are learning on Leopard 2s, working their light infantry is hopefully getting very familiarized with the Bradley, and that we are weeks away from those troops appearing elsewhere on the front to stage a major breakthrough. Hopefully. Again, if the assessments are wrong and that there's still a lot of elite Ukrainian troops here, one statement indicated that that Zelensky had ordered the reinforcement of Bakhmut, which may indicate that they need more time. It may indicate, though, that they are blind to the strategic realities that Bakhmut, not that important, not worth losing significant amounts of Ukrainian combat power. Even the British Ministry of Defense agrees that this it continues to degrade forces on both sides, but they argue Ukrainian forces probably stabilize the defensive perimeter, hopefully for the time being. And again, the Wagner Group and Russian Ministry of Defense very, very publicly squabbling over the allocation of ammunition. When we look at, of course, War Mapper, you guys can see, as they've talked about, Russian forces continuing to press on all sides, especially on the eastern part of the Bakhmutka. So, even the U.S. Defense Secretary, Lloyd Austin, has come out and is publicly, again, listen to the message and the messenger here. He is out there saying that the fall of Bakhmut is not a strategic win for Russia. Wow, that sounds like something you've been saying for weeks, Paul. I know. And it doesn't necessarily indicate Russia will change the course of the war. All it means is that, yes, with enough blood spilled and enough bodies stacked up, you too can take a destroyed mining town. So we have to place what's happening into context, and we hope that Ukrainian forces can do so. Again, it's worrying that supposedly Ukrainian ground forces are recommending the continued defense of Bakhmut and asked Zelensky to strengthen it in the area. That's probably why Lloyd Austin got on the podium himself and as clearly as possible said that this is not the place and time to dig your heels in and fight the Russians. And though the presidential advisor said that the defense of Bakhmut has achieved its goals and been a great strategic success, it's true. As we talked about, strategically, they are in a great. Ukrainian forces are, depending on their casualty levels and the experience level of their remaining military, it could very well be a great strategic success. But you really have to, it's hard to understate how bad an idea it would be to continue to try to hold Bakhmut. Anyway, guys, ISW's assessing that Russian forces fighting in Bakhmut are drawn from elite elements of the Wagner Group and from Russian airborne units, as well as lower quality troops. So this is another, again, piece of evidence for that idea that it is special forces, VDV forces that are operating there in Bakhmut now. So anyway, that's all I had for you guys. As always, if you want access to the uncensored combat video breakdowns, the kind that YouTube definitely won't let me show you, we do those on the Patreon. This week, I'm almost certainly going to be breaking down the iconic POW video, and we're going to talk about why exactly the people are saying this was a war crime. But obviously, I can't do it on this platform, but it's on the Patreon. Thanks so much to my Colonel and Lieutenant tier patrons. I have to update this. There's even more, you guys, now. It really, I appreciate so much you guys supporting the channel. I'm trying here to give you guys the unbiased reality on the ground, the kind that sometimes the major media outlets don't want to say, even the bad news. So that's all I got. I'll see you guys in the next one.